Yeah, boy. Yeah, boy. Yeah, boy. Yeah, boy. Yeah, boy. Hi, Fotar.
What's up, Samito?
Listen, welcome to this episode of Conversas. I'm thrilled to have you here, and I want to thank you for not just being here, but for helping make it happen. So today, what we're doing, we're diving into this crucial discussion on like decolonization of the Canadian art sector, which is sort of a monumental task. And as I try to delve into it and try to find meaning in relation to my own work and like the people I have around me, I just quickly realized that we cannot talk about this big topic without talking about another topic, which is equity. And one of the issues we have in the art sector in general is that it's almost impossible to discuss equity if the sector itself is still struggling in figuring out what is the true meaning of equity. As I tried to piece it together and figure out how to start this project, I was like, actually, maybe there's a little bit of hope if we turn the lenses to like the artists, to people who create things, because I believe that, many different people are already like embodying some of the concepts I want to talk with creators and I want to talk with people that are actually building new things, and try to sort of learn from them about their process and how they deal with these big things when it comes to like sort of imbalance of like resources and all of that. And then when I first learned about your social media app, I became very, very like intrigued, and I wanted to talk about that. Could you tell me a little bit more about the inspiration behind this really interesting project?
First of all, thank you for having me.
My
Yeah, I'm
pleasure.
really excited
That was a
to.
long introduction, but
Oh, well, sometimes you have to take your time, right?
let's
We'll
go.
be talking about that for sure.
Yeah.
I'd say inspirations for me, well, there's a few things. I think on the personal side, it is very interesting in terms of what I have to use to work on it. I have to do design. It's more creative. I could be inspired by art, right? In terms of how my design's inspired. I have to programming more technical. There's a very big social aspect. Literally, it's a social media app, but the idea of sharing something with people, communications. When social media apps grow, they typically become part of the culture in a sense and influence culture. And even there, there's a crossover into mixing with the arts world, design world. Obviously, and technically, as these things grow too, things get very technical, very complicated. They use lots of new technologies as well, right? I'm not using too many fancy algorithms right now, but I will have to eventually, most
Yeah,
likely.
totally.
It is really interesting on a personal level to allow me to touch on different things I'm interested in, different things I'd like to do. I think that it's a big challenge, especially to work on this on my own. You can kind of feel spread out in many different places, but it's so much fun that I know as I work on this, I have to kind of be in all these different realms. Maybe for some people, it's not what they would like. For me, I like that. I do enjoy that. So I think for one, that's one thing. Second, I can at least get started independently. Now, independently, like, what does that mean? I mean, I still have to obviously find ways to make money so that I could live my life, and, your housing, food, that kind of thing. But when it comes to the project, I always tell myself, I have a computer, I have some internet access, I can build. Right?
That's so interesting.
Yeah, and that is really nice. It gives me some liberty, makes me feel like I can have my space and create my time in a sense to actualize myself through this software project. A lot of projects that people do often need a lot of funds even to get started. I may need funds eventually. Right now, I don't need a lot of funds. I could talk to somebody, go back to my computer, work on a little bit. I also know that even in future, let's say the user base grows to be quite a high number because of how I structured it as well. I don't need too many funds to run the product, right? So I do have that. That also makes it very interesting for me, that it seems something that I could do on my own to get started, and that's quite viable even as it grows in the early stages. This gives me some freedom, for sure, and gives me a sense of possibility that I can control. So again, there's a really hard part that comes with it, which is you have to learn all the stuff and do it on your own,
exactly.
right? So I think that thing of being interested in many different things, that comes back. I'm interested to work and use different kind of tools, different kinds of ways of thinking. It's a challenge, but I enjoy the challenge. If you don't enjoy the challenge, if you don't like that kind of challenge, then it wouldn't really work out for you, right?
I'm interested in this, in something you mentioned before when it comes to this idea of being self-reliant, and starting from a very minimal space. Like you said, you have a computer, you know, you can create, you can produce. I think it's fabulous and it's fascinating to me. What led to your decision to exclusively feature emojis and bright colors? How does that reflect on your approach on simplifying the app interface?
For a long time, even I'd say in my late teens, I was interested in social media. And throughout all this time, I would experiment with different kinds of prototype apps, a lot of different kind of prototype apps. So I was working a bit more with multimedia. And then I thought one day, okay, how can I make it easier to post? I wanted this thing where people would feel compelled to post, and not because there was some kind of a gamified feature where it's you have to post to get something or so. It was more that the app was just so simple, so easy. There was a community that was created somehow through some design features that made it so welcoming. People would post and would happen more than with the social media apps typically of today. And basically what I realized was that as long as you have to create content, i.e. if you have to write a sentence, take or share a picture, create a video, there's still a bit of a barrier in terms of that creation of the content.
Yeah.
And then what I realized is that no matter how simple I would make something, there's still this barrier. And so then I started thinking, well, what's possible? Is there a way to make it simpler? And then the requirements I came up with were that I would need to have a set of items somehow, and where the combinations of these items would be sufficiently expressive, so people can still express themselves in different ways. It needs to be they need to be familiar to people to a degree, and ideally it should be fun and playful. I think with social media, there's this fun, playful nature oftentimes, or there should be some joy in using the items in this set to combine to make something. And then I thought, colors, I think maybe colors could help go in that direction. I used to do layouts of interfaces just using colors. So I would if I'm doing my interface and just seeing the big pieces, I'll make it one color, one piece, another section, another color, just to visualize it. And I thought, maybe there's actually something there. And then emojis seem to be the best fit in terms of it's familiar to people, it's fun. You can combine them to mean different things. And people also are used to the emoji classification already because using them through texting and that kind of thing. But it was really about satisfying that idea of the set of items with sufficient combination for expressivity, fun, and familiarity for people, right?
You speak about this project as a new project, right? That is just coming out and starting. But when I hear you talk, it really feels like there were many considerations and reflections behind it. It tells me also that this product has already had other iterations before. Can you talk about that? And I remember you mentioning certain things of, the genesis of this project being in a different project way back. So can you talk about that? What was it before and how did you come to this,
But the big vision was trying to think of what can be a starting point that I could develop the beginnings on my own, or it could, in theory, become a big platform that has all kinds of functionality. So projects before ëmolo right now, it's always been the thing of, okay, I start here, I do this, it grows. Like, can it logically, in my mind, be a platform that would integrate other features, other methods of posting, and become kind of a central platform for people? We see often with social media apps that come out, they have a particular feature. Uh, it often seems quite niche initially, the feature or particular. Some platforms you can more easily see how they could add more features to kind of become like a platform that could be central to your life in many different ways. Some you could tell, okay, it's doing this, they want to add certain things, but it's never going to get out of being just for this usage, right? Just for this kind of function. For me, ëmolo was the best place to start, given today's landscape, given how people feel about social media, even if we look at things like moderation, like the cost of actually running it, for all these reasons, I really feel it's the best place to start. ëmolo, when I look at what the base of the colors, the emojis, this new way of posting, what I see is a fresh beginning that really can be the foundation for a platform that would have all kinds of ways of interacting, posting, that kind of thing. I really think that it's a new way for people to respond to each other and express themselves just with that little piece of the two emojis, the small one, two big ones, small one, and the color. But the key thing is when I look at ëmolo and I look at the structure of it, I think all kinds of content could fit into that structure, right? So there is this idea of looking at the design and to fit it for now, but also to think that this kind of design is a new approach that can work with other kind of content, that can work with other kinds of interactions, right? That's been a really key thing. It's a balancing act. You don't want to think too much like you can predict the future. You can't predict the future. You can't also be scared of the future too. You plan something, you have to know there's a risk and uncertainty in what you're going to do. But you could do your best to think about it. I've tried doing my best to think about it and to be honest with myself about where I'm starting, what I'm doing. And at different moments, I've pivoted and shifted to different ideas. Right now, I think this colors and emojis in this landscape structure, very bright, colorful, right, grid, kind of two sides, there are the contrast there. I think that's at least a very good place to start.
How do you plan to implement and enforce like measures in ëmolo and just to ensure like positive and secure user experience?
So this allowed me to think about what kind of feelings people could express initially. Initially, it was just very happy emojis, so the hearts, the stars, that kind of thing. But in response to people feeling often a bit sad in social media or feeling uncomfortable, just feelings of wanting more connection. I kind of wanted to just start it in a very safe, happy, expressive way. People are just playing with the combinations. Yeah, the range of expression in a way isn't too much because it's all very positive, but you can still play with picking whatever combination of flower and heart you want. And that's been interesting to see how people are still uniquely choosing their combinations. But within this space, it's kind of restricted, right? And then I'm gonna add more emojis, add more, which will add fun and some buzz, that kind of thing, of course, right? But the key thing is there can be a lot of thought about what new feelings and expressions are being added, see how people use it, and respond if there's any need to. Like with emojis, you could still be mean, of course, but it's not as bad, I think, as words.
Words, yeah.
Yeah, it's not as bad as words. Also, in terms of moderating, like visually, I mean, if I put the emoji in, like that's the emoji, you can only combine it. So there's not gonna be, if you think of photo and video where, okay, we need to make sure there's certain things are not possible to post on the platform, or if it does go up, it's taken away right away. It's not an issue with the emojis, right? Like I'm legit choosing what emojis are available. People go and combine them, that's about it. I mean, all I can think about is if a certain combination is coded to be nefarious or mean, that then I'd have to like block that combination, for example. Like maybe people are gonna say, okay, if you put the purple heart and the blue heart, it's a code word for this thing, and that becomes culturally the norm, so I need to block that combination, right? These things could happen, but we have to go that deep to think about big problems or just problems, period, in terms of moderation in ëmolo. As a dev, like I'm sympathetic to the difficulties of actually programming, all these kinds of things, what resources you may need to implement. Let's say you're a couple people and you want to have someone look at all the content and check it if it gets reported. It's a lot to do, but you try to find ways to do what you can, which is why I also chose to work with emojis, because at this stage, even as one person, I could feel quite confident about the moderation in the platform.
I can relate to it in terms of like what I do at FEZIHAUS, and like one of our pillars that we're still exploring is this idea of well-being. But by well-being, I also mean the well-being of the creator as well. In what ways do you plan to incorporate elements of like well-being into ëmolo's design, or like promote mental health? How do you see space for that?
Yeah, when it comes to the mental health aspect, I think the main thing I thought about a lot was clout, and to not make it so much about clout. People like metrics sometimes. They can hook people, how many views, how many likes, how many friends does somebody have, all that kind of thing, how many followers, or all these metrics that people like to see does get people engaged onto platforms. And especially if you think about like platforms early on, maybe it was even new ideas to have some of these things, but say, oh, let's create a feature that could show how many people enjoy the post or so, and then let's display that. I think we've also seen that sometimes these things can make people focus too much on these numbers, and it may not necessarily be the best thing for the mental health. Is it really the best thing for the purpose of the platform? If it's for people to connect together, social media in terms of being social, sharing content, engagement content, catching up with friends, seeing what people that you admire that maybe aren't your friends are doing, somehow having a connection, right? Are all these metrics actually the most important thing to satisfy that? And I mean as in having the metrics visible, right? Like likes and this kinds of thing. I mean, they're important to get people more hooked on the platform, to gamify it and make people want to come back to it because they want to see, did the numbers go up, right? But then it creates this kind of competition or even hierarchy, like, of people who has the most followers, right? Who has the most likes, who's getting the most engagement. Do these things need to be visible? I understand a lot of people use these platforms for their business. It may be their front-facing profile of their creativity. Maybe you could have metrics and it's kind of just you could see it, but then people can't see that. So at least you're not being judged by that as much. Right? There's different ideas around that, and I think people are starting to think about this more and more now. Right now, there's not really like any metric essentially that you could really see in ëmolo. And as I add these kinds of things, I'll be very, very careful. I'd like to minimize it as much as possible, actually. But overall, I don't want it to be about that. There's too much clout with social media. There's too much just trying to get the clout. People feel like they're not getting enough clout, right? I didn't get enough engagement here and enough engagement there. Like, what's it really about? If you want to express yourself, and you have people that aren't even using their profile necessarily in a business perspective, just their personal profile, but they still feel this need to have to satisfy the numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I don't think this is. I don't think it's a good thing. I think a lot of people don't think it's a good thing, and I'm definitely gonna resist as much as possible being lured to that in terms of feature implementation. I'll try as much as possible to minimize that, and but to still consider what users have to say, and if need be, for more professional users or that kind of thing, maybe have a bit. But for now, in this emoji context and color context, like, no, really try to reduce it. Yeah.
Well, while creating your product can come from a very minimal personal space, you're also operating in a highly competitive kind of sector. My curiosity is, how have challenges in navigating the intersection between arts, technology, and invention as a Black Canadian influence your approach?
There's a lot of things that can make you doubt, what you do. Even if I look at just, the way I live my life, like the way I dress, the kind of the art that I'm into, the circles that I'm in, right? I'm not someone that's like, I don't know, even growing up in Canada or so, okay, when you're doing your PhD in like computer science or something, and you worked at all these startups or so, and now you're coming out to do your project with a bunch of other people that went to a bunch of like blue chip schools, and maybe they have family members that are involved, that kind of thing. That's not my environment. I do have my degree of privilege, and my parents are both educated at a university level. Spending time at McGill, still being around some people in the startup community, that kind of thing in Montreal, for sure. But I also walk around here with the clothes I wear, being used to being looked at a little differently, hanging out with many of my queer friends in circles that are very particular, right? Like that's kind of where I'm coming from. Is someone like me typically who goes on to make a product like what I'm making, let alone to grow and succeed. If you look at the statistics, they're definitely not. But on the flip side, I think you have to have some belief in yourself and the possibility, and see what's possible, right? Like what can you do? I always go back to I have food, shelter, I have some internet, I have a computer. Okay, let's go. Let's see what's up. I definitely made decisions in terms of what I'm working on that were in large part founded by the fact that I could do it without relying on much apart from myself for the project directly. Right?
You believe in yourself, you can do it. You don't need money to put on the app right now. But how scalable you see this project go? Is there a point where you're like, okay, I'll need money, and I'll need a lot of money. I'll need private equity. Is there a moment you feel like that's going to be needed?
I think I'll have the option. At the same time, too, it's a thing like, what do you want to do, right? Like if I want to make up the product, if I want ëmolo to have all these features, or be able to go all over the world and for people to enjoy it and use it, there is a direction of thinking that if that's the goal, you can't do it alone. If I want to talk about accessibility, if I want the app to be in 100 languages, right, and to work quickly all over the world, maybe to have more different ways to post, high moderation, right, be on many different platforms, right, Apple, Android, right, web. We'll see. This is not something I'm going to do alone in a reasonable period of time. Like just that work is I don't know how long, right? And to do it well, I'd have to work with people. I'd have to grow a team. So there's also thinking about if I want to make it this thing that people could use, and I believe in that as a potential to be a platform where people could really make it central to their digital social life. It will require raising money because it's going to require working with more people so that it could grow and could actually develop all these features in a sustainable way, in a good way, right? So I do think, yeah, for sure, it's going to need money if that's a track I want to take. But I think also the key thing is being able to start. Like, can you get started, right? Like, I'm able to get started on my own. I'm able to test things out, talking to people, able to develop and learn. I think it also will put me in a better position when I really have to go on the sales tour, right? So I come from a place of trying to see how you could test and start things, but recognizing that in many cases, you cannot go the whole path alone.
In an ideal scenario where fairness isn't approached incrementally, but rather has an utopian ideal in favor of like envisioning an alternative future, what does a world that embodies true equity look like to you?
Two things that do come to mind that I've thought about are, on an individual level, can we get to a point where collectively in the utopia, right, we've all dealt with our guilt and our trauma, And I think, at least on the individual level, like that would really help equity. I think that trauma sometimes can make you feel like you shouldn't be in the room. Everyone has trauma to different degrees. What would the world look like if, even for Indigenous people, more of that trauma has been dealt with, right? And that also puts it on us. When we look at what the government has to do, now they're kind of finding more and more issues from the past, more proof of wrongdoings that were done. It's not like just an individual thing, but to do it and collectively help people actually get through their trauma, be acknowledged, to be heard, and somehow be able to have that understood as part of their history and have the belief in themselves and the ability to live their day-to-day without too much of the flashes or too much of the pulls restraining them, right?
But that also implies like creating the space where that happens. And sometimes
100%.
the space is dependent on the other party.
Yeah, I think assuming the guilt, thinking it through, working through it, and then being able to create that space and hold that space for people that are trying to get through their trauma, that kind of thing, right? I think in a world where it's equitable, that we would have to have individuals have gone through a much more work getting through both of these things, and then collectively that would help us know how to work together, be together, right? We can still disagree, people will disagree on things politically, different ideas about where the world is supposed to go, but still the idea of the trauma, the guilt, and being able to just get through that, right? And be at a place where you know you've done your self-work, right? You're open to making things more equitable. I think individually we need these things to be a lot higher, and then collectively we can work together to make things happen. In our present day, there's a lot that has to be done for those two things, right? Some people feel like we make some progress, and then you could say, oh, we've put so much effort towards DEI, right? Right? Diversity, equity, inclusion. You know, there are some people that feel like we've had a few years of DEI and that now we're more than perfect. If anything, maybe actually now it's unfair. Some people might feel that way. I would say at the least, like, you know, run some numbers, look at the past. I mean, not everything is in the numbers too. Stats is also very tricky. I think it's important to note, like, it's not, stats aren't just fixed, like someone does the stats and has their measures, right? But still, you know, is this really true that all of a sudden things are equal, things are fair?
Yeah.
We have to remove all the measures, the world is fair, that kind of thing, right? Or not the world is fair, but, you know, North America, Montreal, or the US, there's these conversations happening right now after a few years. Have people actually done the research, thought about the past, looked at the things that have happened, processed, took on some guilt, processed it, understood the traumas, and helped others to get through that. I think if that was what was happening, we wouldn't have this kind of DI pushback in this kind of way, or at least deeper conversations about it.
I think you made a really interesting point in speaking about guilt and trauma, you know, because I feel like that's often what we're fighting with, you know, so very, very grateful. So Fotar, I think one thing that we didn't talk enough here is that you're also a DJ, and me and you met through music, you know, so why not like